As I was reading that, I was like, wow, I don't think I've seen a sunrise in 7 years. I don't get up early enough for that.
I know, same.
Back to another episode of Romancing the Monsters. I'm Em.
I'm Seth.
And this week we are talking about Shades of Darkness by Nikki James, which is a novel. It is the second book in the Trials of Fear series. It is a series of standalone.
It's also our second book on here.
That's correct as well. Not, the second one in my lifetime, but the second one on the podcast for sure. And it's actually a series I've talked about before, though I can't seem to remember what episode it was. It was an episode where I think it might have been an Immortals After Dark book that dealt with mental health in some capacity, and I mentioned how much I love her books.
Yes.
And
I think it must have been an early Immortals After Dark book.
I wonder if it wasn't maybe Conrad. Or no, you know what it was? It was one of the girls has OCD.
Right.
It could have been Holly or
Holly.
Yeah, it might have been Holly. And I was saying, like, if you're looking for books that have mental health, that talk about mental health in, all sorts of ways, some of them it's much more heavy, some of them it's kind of just sprinkled in, whatever. I was saying that Nikki James is the perfect author for that because she always has elements of that. And the Trials of Fear series is essentially, I'm doing Seth's job right now. I'll let you do the blurb.
No, but it's fine. Go ahead.
The setup for the series essentially is that in each book you have a character who is fighting a phobia. It's severe phobias. You have, a phobia of light in this case, a phobia of falling asleep, phobias of eating, phobias of whatever. It's really cool, and you learn tons about phobias that you never even thought could exist. But mostly it focuses on how does said phobia affect someone's, work life, friendships, love life, social life, whatever it may be. And so I'll let Saf go from there before I just take over everything.
No, it's fine. All right, so we start off with a character named Rory who's living, but he's doing the bare minimum. He works at home, only has one friend, doesn't really go out much, and it's because he has heliophobia, which is basically a fear of the light from the sun, and basically any light, but it's gotten to the point where he now cannot deal with artificial light, meaning like light inside the house, and it causes him to have severe anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and because of his friend Krew, who also is his fuck buddy, he ends up convincing him to get counseling or therapy. Not therapy, because therapy isn't covered and it's too expensive for him. And so he decides to get counseling. Enter Adrian, who is a freshly graduated university student, who's got a job as counselor and ends up being Rory's counselor. And we find out that he needs money to move out of his student housing because his roommates are bullies and makes his life completely miserable. And his parents they're just ignoring his like cries for help and like wanting to move out and wanting to be out of that toxic environment. So he takes it into his own hands and gets this job and works crazy hours, like he's working in the night, which makes him the perfect counselor for Rory because he doesn't leave the house until the sun has set, like completely. And also he doesn't really leave the house, so he would need a counselor at home, and obviously Adrian makes that move and ends up at his house, and that's how our two men meet. And I don't know,
sparks fly.
They just have an instant connection, and like they sound great, and like their chemistry was crazy, and but because of Rory's traumas, and and how, like, just how they were born and like how he's lived with them, it's kind of hard for him to speak about them. And also, it causes for Adrian's own anxiety to kick in because he kind of feels like he's failing at his job. And Adrian is not someone that has a lot of self confidence. And like, so him seeing his first client kind of like shut down and not respond makes him kind of question his own qualities and abilities. Um, but that doesn't stop Rory from further pursuing him because he does feel a connection a connection there that he hasn't felt with anyone else, including Krew. So he decides to close his file with Adrian's company, and so that they can explore their budding relationship and their chemistry. But yeah,
And that could sound problematic in the sense that like Rory's like, oh fuck, my treatments, I just would rather, fuck you.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the case. Rory isn't really getting any better. He's actually getting worse. But that before Rory cancels his therapy sessions with Adrian, Adrian ends up going to visit a specialist who specializes in phobias, like extreme phobias, and kind of has to convince Rory to pursue therapy with her. I don't know where else to go with this without, talking about the whole plot, but it's just like their story together as well as their stories individually, their story of healing. And yeah, I don't know, I'm not supposed to say I like it yet, but I did like it.
Well, okay, so what I wanted to say was that even though it could sound problematic that Rory is like, oh, fuck this, like, I don't need this anyway, blah, blah, blah. It's important to know that, like, Adrian, who knows how much he needs that, doesn't give up on, like, trying to find help. And, like, I think by that point in the story, he's also, like, very aware that he's not the right person for Rory on that, like, side of things. Like, he needs someone else to help him out. So you started saying how much you like it. So tell me all the things. Because, okay, here's the thing. Like I said, I've read this book before. Yeah. Steph had not. So this was her first time reading it. So what did you think?
I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very well-rounded story in terms of like characters and like character development. And like the romance was even good and angsty, and I just loved the characters, but I did feel like the bullying was really hard for me to read. And like it got to the point where like it made me like feel the pit in my stomach, like made me like my anxiety kick in, and it was just like it was really hard to read. And like I kind of wish I knew how bad the bullying was in the story beforehand so I could mentally prepare myself. Because
that's
I feel like
my fault.
No, I mean it's not necessarily your fault.
I didn't say anything. Well, I mean, I could have said something. I just didn't think about it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, but I don't know. I just found it like really hard to read to the point where like I would put the book down and like not revisit it for a bit because like as soon as I think about it, I'm like, oh shit, like I have to go back to that place in my mind. But overall, I really enjoyed the story. I just wish the bullying, but like, I mean, we can't get away from bullying. It happens every day. It happens everywhere. It literally could be happening right now. Probably is. And it's just like it's a sad situation.
I thought you were gonna say like it could literally be happening here right now. I was like, geez, have I been bullying you? Is that what you're gonna say? Outing me like that?
No, I just mean it's always happening in our world, and we can't just turn a blind eye to what's going on and like the extent of how awful it could be for some people.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, well, this time around, I will admit, I had read the story, so I knew what was coming, and so it didn't, like, affect me as much as it did the first time from memory.
Yeah.
But I will say that for me, I don't think it was ever the bullying that was anxious for me because it's never been something that affects me personally. Thankfully, I've never been a victim of bullying, so it's not like a theme that is triggering to me in any way. However, I will say that when I read this series the first time, the whole series, I am someone who has a phobia, though it's like a very common phobia unlike these people, and it's this phobia that I can, manage. But I remember when I read the series the first time, it was triggering. Wow. Seeing people like struggle with their own anxiety I remember sometimes I had to step away from the books because
Yeah.
it is well written on that front, like how people experience anxiety. And here it's just Rory, but like throughout the series, it's experienced differently by all these characters, and yeah, I remember being triggered by that. So definitely keep that in mind, whether it's bullying or anxiety or I mean, there are several possible like trigger warnings throughout the series.
Yeah. Trigger warnings abound.
Yeah. So keep that in mind if you're someone who you think you might be sensitive to that type of stuff, then maybe this is not the series for you. Maybe wait till you're in a better headspace to read it. 'Cause
I second that.
yeah. And as far as whether or not I liked it, I mean, that's pretty obvious that I did. But I will say that I thoroughly enjoyed my reread.
That's good.
And I'm not someone that likes to reread contemporary books ever.
And you also have been struggling with contemporary anyway.
A lot, yeah. But I really enjoyed it. It's just, there's something about Nikki James's writing that I just fall right into. Like, she just pulls me in. And I don't know, like, everyone has authors like that. Like, I guess people call them, like, unicorns or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's kind of that for me. It's like, whenever I start one of her stories, I just get pulled in and I just lose myself in it. And it's great. So please never stop writing.
No, she writes really well. And, okay, so, like, when I read this, it felt like a regular romance novel, you know? Like, some authors kind of just make a gay romance very like sexual, and like their sex
very
scenes
catered
are
towards the female gaze,
exactly,
rather than towards like just making them people, because that's what they are.
Exactly. And
I see what you mean.
Yeah, and I just like, it felt like a romance novel, and it like some scenes were fade to black, and you know, some scenes were shown, like obviously their first time was shown and like things like that, but like it wasn't every single scene, and it wasn't like heightened, you know, like it wasn't like crass, or it wasn't vulgar. It was just like, it honestly was just a romance novel at its core, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, she's very good at letting people be people.
Yeah,
essentially, you know, like, and that's very true. Like, that's absolutely a fact that, you know, more and more women are writing but making it, I guess that the only way to describe it is just catered towards the female gaze. And you know, people have opinions on that. I don't think that we are the right people to discuss that.
No,
to begin
of course
with,
not.
But it's interesting that you point that out, because I hadn't actually noticed that until you just mentioned it, and I was like, yeah, I can totally see what you mean by that.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. All right. So,
yes.
First thing I wanted to discuss, because you mentioned it in your blurb. One thing, well, first of all, can we talk about Krew for a minute? How did you like Krew?
I love Krew. He's the sweetest.
The sweetest? That is not the word I would use for him.
Okay, no, I'm thinking about, you know, like that whole like situation that happened with Adrian at the school. That's when he was the sweetest, and I fell in love with him then. And I need him to have his happily ever after.
He's a great friend. He's the friend that you want on your side.
Yes.
But I just fucking love Krew, man. Like, he is one of my favorite characters in this series, but like, period. Like, in contemporary. Because obviously he comes back in the later books. This is like the first book where you meet him, but he's a definite presence, and he gets a book, which, by the way, his book is like a daddy book. So, but Krew is just so much fun. He is so much fun.
He's so funny.
He has no inhibitions. He is unapologetically himself.
Exactly, and I love it.
He's wild. He's flashy. He's fancy. I love him to bits so much. This book made me want to reread his book, because
I want to read his story too, so I might actually visit that.
And you know what? He stays true to himself. And actually, I remember messaging Nikki James after reading his book, and I was like, thanks for letting Krew stay Krew. You know, even through his book. Like, there's things that he says, like, I mean, I don't know if you noticed that, but at some point he says that he's not into spankings.
Yeah.
And I was so scared that she was going to go back on that. But no, like, Krew is not into that. And he sets his boundaries and he's like, this is who I am. This is what I like. And this is what I don't like. And you're not going to go, beyond that. And you know how much I love a good spanking in my
Me
book.
too.
But I respect someone who respects himself and his likes and dislikes more.
Yeah, I guess as much as I am sad that there's no spanking in his book, I am happy that he stays true to himself.
There's plenty of other things, but that's his hard limit.
What? Out of all things?
Well, I mean, there's like daddy stuff and,
Okay.
stern brunch daddy, that energy, that's his book. So, Anyways, all this to say, to go from Krew to a much more serious topic, to say that I really like how this book demonstrates how you can have really good people in your life, and sometimes they can unknowingly have a negative impact on your well-being.
I know.
Because obviously, Krew started helping Rory with, chores that he found difficult and such. He says, and this is Rory that says that, he says, before Krew, I wasn't as bothered by artificial lighting. Going to the store was uncomfortable but not debilitating. When I was given the option of allowing Krew to take on those harder chores, it had facilitated my decline. Without either of us realizing it, he'd enabled me to hide where I was most comfortable, in complete darkness. Moderately difficult situations became nearly impossible until I'd reached the point where I was at. I just think that that's a side of mental health that I feel like we forget about. Because, yeah, you reach a point of being comfortable, and if people facilitate your situation even more, thinking that they're doing a good, that they're helping you out, they're actually enabling you to stay where it's the most comfortable. Whereas what you should be doing is getting outside of your comfort zone and pushing yourself to, re-enter society and, break down your own barriers as opposed to reinforcing them.
Yeah, because when you see someone that you love in pain, like, your first instinct is to
help
go
them.
and help them and do whatever you can to lessen their burden. And sadly, in this case, it, like you said, it enabled Rory to digress in everything, basically, for him.
In a similar way, Krew is also the reason why Rory got help, because we have two really interesting perspectives on the stigma around mental health in this book, because you have Rory who doesn't trust people and doesn't want to open up to people and tell them how he is or, what happened to him. And so he's reinforcing that sort of stigma, because he says at one point, I knew I was fucked up in the worst way, but chasing down help and begging doctors to do something was getting old. If the system didn't give a fuck about me, why should I give a fuck about me?
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, you have Adrian, who is going through stuff as well. And he's trying to overcome this by opening up and telling people, but people are, again, because of this stigma, are being like, well, you're just being a child. Like, you should be the grown-up and not care what people say about you or do to you and blah, 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 which is awful.
Exactly. Like, his own father tells him, like, grow up. Like, this should be happening when you're a kid. You're an adult now. Like, you need to grow some balls and, like, it'll go away. And that's not the case. That will never happen. That would, his dad really angered me.
How did you feel about how that was resolved? Like, ultimately,
they got
the
nothing.
Dad being...
Oh, you mean the dad?
Yeah, like the situation with the dad at the end.
I mean, I like that it wasn't a perfect ending in the sense where, like, he doesn't automatically just become a supportive father. He's just like, okay, fine. You want to live here? That's your choice. Here is your new apartment. And and I guess he does later on meet Rory, but I don't know. His dad was really irritating to me, and as well as the mother as well. She was more so enabling her husband's behavior.
Yeah.
And also just ignoring her son when he was like, Mom, I need to talk to you. I met someone. She's like, oh, our cleaning lady is here. I gotta go. Like,
Well, I mean, I guess she does take on like a more passive role in
she
their
does, but then in
relationship.
turn she enables her husband's behavior
Sure.
as well as
Yeah.
allowing the bullying to
Mm-hmm.
continue.
It's interesting though how Adrian sort of projects what he thinks his father thinks of him onto his father in a way. Like, yeah, sure, his father is awful in some parts of this book and, only thinks of himself and their family name and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how Adrian thought that his father had something against him being gay, whereas
Yeah.
in the end, his father's like, yeah, no, I don't care about that, I just, I love the line where he's like, at least he can't get you pregnant like I did with your mother.
That is true. That was like a great little tidbit in there. I like that.
Because I feel like it'd be easy for that to be the issue. So I like that the author is like, you know what, in the end, it actually isn't. Like, that's not the core of the issue. It's really just his father is a little bit self-centered.
And wants his son to,
be happy, but like his own version of what happiness means.
Be smart and graduate and become a doctor. And
yeah,
I mean, like,
successful.
That's literally the dream of a lot of parents. And a lot of parents kind of forget or ignore their children's emotions and what they're struggling with just to ensure that they complete school or complete their degree or whatever. And, like, it's at the expense of their child's happiness, but they just see a degree in a high prestigious career and then they're like, yeah, you're set.
So, I mean, does that make them evil? No.
Not necessarily. I guess it's a difference in perspective and like what you value over the other person. And
I think I feel like oftentimes those issues do actually come from a place of like just wanting your kids to do better than you did yourself.
Oh,
just wanting your kids to be more successful because you love them, but it's the way you go about it, right?
Yes.
Like, in this case, it's all wrong. And in this case, some people don't understand that what they think is success means like success is not what success is to someone else. For Adrian, it's becoming a like not a doctor, but like a practitioner, I guess, like a psychologist.
No, he still will be a doctor. Like, he still have like doctor whatever his last name is.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I mean, he's not going to be a neurosurgeon like his father. I will say I was I kind of wanted Rory's parents to make an appearance.
They do in the like last book where it's like a reunion book.
Oh, okay. I just feel like he needed to tell his parents what was going on with him. And I know he's stressed about not wanting them to worry and like not wanting them because they don't have enough money to like fly to Toronto. Which, I love that it's set here. Although Dewhurst is like a made up place, but it's fine, I like the mention of U of T where,
I just like that it's set in a fictional Canadian town.
Yeah.
Gotta love that.
So like
Never
I
happens.
could relate. Anyways,
I was like, oh, it's our health system, like, yay. They have a health card.
I went to the U of T that Adrian was like hating on. But yeah, no, I really felt like for Rory to have like complete, not closure, but like the full beginnings of healing, he needed to also like have a support system, which is great. He had Adrian and he also had Krew, but I also feel like maybe having his parents there, depending on like what their relationship was. Like, all I know was like what he said, like we only really know what he said about his parents. Sometimes they seemed like great parents, sometimes not. And like,
I mean, I think they are great parents. It's just their situation is a lot more difficult than like Adrian's parents. That was actually one of my questions, like, how did you feel about how it ends? Because to me, I actually love how it ends. I love that it's just the beginning. They're only scratching the surface of the beginning of Rory's journey. Like, it ends with him going out in the very early morning sunlight for the first time and seeing a sunrise for the first time in 7 years, which as I was reading that, I was like, wow, I don't think I've seen a sunrise in 7 years. I don't get up early enough for that.
I know, same. I mean, the last time I probably saw one was like, no, because when I went to Australia, everyone else woke up in the house but me. I was like, I'm not waking up that early. So yeah, no,
Girl,
that's
I would
not
wake
even
up early for a sunrise in Australia. Come on.
It was just like sleep is more
Because, like,
important.
somehow the sunrise in Australia is totally different than the sunrise here. But no, I love how it ends. I love that there's so much left, not wrapped up with a little bow. Like,
Yes.
it's very much his journey is only beginning, because your journey with anxiety is a journey, and God knows if there's an end to it. It's kind of just a constant battle in most cases, where you don't suddenly not have that phobia. You only learn to control it and not let it control you.
Exactly.
And for Rory, it's like he's not there yet at all.
No.
But I will say that you do, for all characters, I think you do see them, continue on their journey in sort of the background. And then in that final book, they're still not like completely, great and living a totally normal life, but you can see that all of them are well enough that they're now able to take steps forward with their lives. So like have a baby, get married, whatever. Like they're finally able to do that, which they never even thought was possible for them, for most of them, because it's like, that phobia was taking up so much of their lives that it's like, how can I even let someone enter this space? Which is definitely a theme with Rory, because he's like, I'll never know love. I'll never know what it's like to have a boyfriend. I'll never know this, because how can I expect someone to live this life? So all he had was Krew.
But that wasn't necessarily his mentality at the beginning. He was more so like, I don't do relationships. I don't do that and that and that. And then as soon as
but why do you think he was saying that?
Oh, obviously, yeah. No, it's because of that. I mean, like, maybe he doesn't think of that personally. Like, maybe it's something that, like, he unconsciously is going through. Like, he doesn't realize until later on. But I did, like, going back to, like, you said that he's not completely, obviously, phobia-free, which he never will be. I like that even it's just, like, a year has passed and he still is, like, struggling with the idea of like going out in the sun, which is why they went to see the sunrise but didn't even stay to see the full sunrise, and it's a year and he's still like, it's not something that like as an outsider you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, such amazing growth, but like for him it's like massive, like it is like an important
it's a
like,
huge leap. Huge. And
I loved how it was handled.
Yeah. I was actually struck many times during this reread with how healthy this relationship is. In the sense that, like, you have Rory, who is, like, your typical, stereotypical, closed off, doesn't trust no one, doesn't want to talk about his past. Like, he's your typical character like that. And yet the amount of times in this book I was surprised that he was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't feel comfortable talking about this, but I know I need to.
Yeah.
So he does. And I was like, oh my God, this is what that character would usually not do. They'd be like, oh, I know I need to talk about this, but I don't want to.
And can we just talk about Adrian and Rory's kind of first session, and like Rory was like, oh my gosh, I need to smoke, and then he starts smoking and poor Adrian has asthma and like he starts wheezing.
I love that scene so much. The first time it gave me so many angst butterflies, because I was like, oh no, poor Adrian is about to die on the floor. And then Rory's like, why the fuck did you not tell me that this could like literally kill you? And Adrian just being like, I didn't think it was professional.
Like, this is your house.
It's so great. And then obviously, like, throughout the story, Rory's like, oh my God, I can't smoke anymore. Or like, he absolutely makes a point of like not smoking around Adrian, or like he tries to stop. And I also love the bit where it's like the new, what's her name? Dr. something. She's in like every book, so I should probably remember her name. So like his new, she's actually a psychiatrist. So she says, because he's trying to stop smoking, and she says like, you can't ask yourself to do both things at the same time. Like, that could actually be dangerous more so than helpful. So, like, you're better off not trying to stop smoking right now and just focusing on your phobia. And once that's, under control, then you can try and remove another thing from your life, because
Yeah.
he was smoking to cope with his anxiety. Like, oftentimes in the book, every time he starts feeling stressed, he pulls out a cigarette and he
Yeah.
starts smoking.
Yeah.
Which, weirdly enough, another thing I noticed upon this reread, I was like, I'm pretty sure, like, this was written by someone who has been around smokers before, because the amount of details surrounding him smoking, I was really surprised. Because, like, in some books, it's like, oh, the bad boy pulls out a cigarette and then the cigarette is not present for the rest of the scene.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he just pulled it out to, look cool, because the author was like, oh, yeah, that's sexy.
Yeah.
Which, smoking is not sexy, people.
No,
Unless
it is not.
is.
Speaking from a girl who actually has asthma, who would be in Adrian's spot, like, it's not.
I will say it's sexy only if it's fictional.
Yeah.
But I was like, the amount of detail, like Rory, he's like moving with the cigarette and it's constantly mentioned. And I was like, wow, I never noticed how much cigarettes just disappear in books until now.
Yeah. Sorry, speaking of Rory and his journey to healing, how did you feel about it being for someone else and like for something else and not for himself? Because basically he was coerced by Krew first and then Adrian to get help and want to get better, because he wanted Adrian and he wanted that relationship with Adrian, and like that was kind of his turning point of actually pursuing the psychiatrist and like actually pushing himself to do better. And it also later on, like we didn't really talk about it, but like he is willing to face the sun light, I guess you could say, for Adrian. Yeah. How did you feel about that?
I think, well, usually this is something that we like to point out when people, take steps forward for someone else. But in this case, I don't know what exactly is different for me. It's almost like if it wasn't for Adrian, I don't think he'd be capable of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think for some people, they reach such a low point that they just need something to pull themselves up, because by themselves, for themselves, they wouldn't be able, like, they're not mentally capable of being like, yeah, I'm doing this for myself.
Yeah.
So they need that something to look forward to, that something to work towards.
Yeah.
Which in this case is like the possibility of this relationship. I do think he does it for himself as well. Like, he, at the beginning, not. But towards the end, I do think it's for himself, especially after we learn about like the whole story, how he came to have this phobia, and the fact that the guys that did it to him ended up in prison, but then got out because of
on good behavior, like
in
8 months.
And he says like, meanwhile I am a prisoner. Like, I'm a prisoner to my own house. I can't go out. I'm a prisoner to the darkness. He even says at some point, and I love that quote, because he was like, the day that this happened, I lost color. Like, he doesn't know color anymore. He hasn't seen it, I don't know. I liked the imagery of, like, the people that did that to him are, free. They're just roaming free, having a normal life. And then the person that lived through this trauma is still trapped, technically free, but trapped.
It's just like, okay, for like we said numerous times on this podcast, like, I'm a firm believer of changing yourself for yourself and wanting better for yourself, and not for someone else, because I don't think it would, stick, or, you could end up hating that person. But I feel like in the case of this story and these characters, it was kind of like love was the push to heal himself, like he saw what he was missing, and he saw what he could have in his life if he were to heal and to get better and manage his phobia. And like, I don't know, it's just, I like that it was like he still saw what he was missing in his life. It wasn't for someone, it was more so like so he could be that person that Adrian needed. Yeah, I don't know. I like how it was dealt with, and I thought that if Adrian wasn't really in his life, would he have gotten better? Would he have like, sought the means to get better? I don't know. I think Adrian was that push that he needed, I think, to become better.
No, yeah, agreed. It's like,
Yeah.
how can you expect someone to heal when they don't have a purpose in life anymore?
Yeah, and like usually you want to be a better person for like, I don't know, when you find your significant other. And these characters both deserve it. Like both Rory and Adrian were struggling mentally and physically, and they both grew together. And like, yeah, sure, Rory's growth was more extensive, but Adrian was going through a lot too, and like both growths were really impactful.
Can we talk about the conference scene?
Okay.
That is the moment in the book where, at least upon my reread, I was like, oh no, I know what's coming. I know what's coming.
I kind of felt something was coming.
Was coming. Oh yeah, I remember that the first time I read it.
Yeah, so the setup of the scene was Rory and Adrian gets like, I don't want to say caught, but like they end up meeting the roommates on the street, and Rory ends up confronting the main one, Kelvin, whatever the fuck his name is. And
Yeah.
like he kind of like aggravates him, makes him angry, and so they decide, so Calvin and is it Devin? I don't know what the other one's name is. Anyways, so they decide to break his lock, and I kind of was like, okay, so are we following up with the lock
Dylan.
being... Sorry? Dylan?
Dylan. Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so I was trying to like figure out how that's going to happen, and then basically what happens later on in the story is Adrian decides to buy
A dildo.
yeah, a dildo, like a toy.
He cause Rory introduced him to his prostate, which love that.
Yeah, I loved it. And anyways, I knew something was happening because it was a fade to black scene. Like,
oh, is that what gave it off?
yeah, I was like, wait, so like they're not gonna show what's going on here? And then like, yeah, because it wasn't a private moment, which is why we didn't see it until later on.
Well, I don't know if that's what that was, or if that kind of connects to what you were saying earlier on about like the fact that she doesn't just fetishizes like what's going on, like like that was
Okay.
his private moment with himself. I don't know. It could be either of those things.
Yeah.
It could be both. You know. But anyway, so that what does that lead to, Seth?
Oh, you want me to say it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Adrian is so excited. He's got this big presentation. He's won all these awards because he's an amazing student, an amazing boy. Not boy, he's like 2 years younger than me. Amazing guy. And basically, what happens is Rory obviously cannot attend the presentation, gets a call from bitch ass Marcus. And Marcus is like, you gotta stop the presentation. Marcus is the other bully. He's more of a passive bully, but we'll talk about him just now. And he's like, you gotta stop the presentation. And then Rory is like, are you dumb? No. And then, anyways, what happens is Marcus sends Rory a video of,
what's gonna be shown on screen that Adrian doesn't know about, and it's the video of Adrian playing with his new toy.
Yeah.
And it's a very private moment. Rory only watches like a minute of it, and then he's like, okay, this is not like for me. Like, I'm not meant to be seeing this. This is a very private moment, and I should respect that. But then he freaks out, and he calls Krew because, ladies and gents, Rory couldn't be there, but he wanted to surprise Adrian, so he sent Krew, of all people, to record the conference so that he could see Adrian's stock, which I was just like, oh my god, I'm dying a little bit inside. So then he's like calling Krew, panic, like, Krew, you have to stop this, blah, blah, blah. And like by the time that Krew realizes what he's saying, well, the thing is already playing for the entirety of the audience.
I know. And his parents were there. I'm pretty sure the dean was there, other professors, high school students. Obviously, no matter what, you don't want anything like that to be shown, let alone at a presentation. And it just like breaks Adrian. Like, it's just, like, it was so heartbreaking to see. Obviously, he runs away crying, and, like, Krew goes after him and, like, tries to get him out of there, and all he just wants to do is see Rory, and then they can't get a hold of Rory because what was Rory doing, Marge?
Because Rory, in his panic, just ran outside
I
in the
know.
sunlight because he loves this man so much that he forgot himself, you know? And he obviously didn't go very far, had a complete panic attack out on the streets. A man found him, you know, got him inside. The police came. Then Adrian and Krew came back, and everyone had to explain why Rory is the way that he is. Which again, interesting that like obviously the first assumption is like, oh, this man is doing drugs, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Instead of like, no, there's actually more in life that could cause this sort of panic attack.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, part of the stigma as well. Anyways, it was that scene, man. Like your heart just falls into the bottom, like the pit of your stomach.
That was a scene that really hit me. Like, it was just the extent that these bullies would go, you know, just to ensure that Adrian is humiliated or like loses his like prestigious, I don't know, honor. I don't even know what they were
Mm-hmm.
hoping for him to lose. I think it was more so to
No, I mean,
humiliate
they tried
him.
to make him lose his job at the very
At the
beginning, which
beginning,
is
yeah. So basically, at the beginning, if you didn't read the book, what they do is they punch holes in a beer can and replace his lunch with this broken beer can. And, like, obviously, he's at Rory's house for the first time, his first client, and his first day on the job. And obviously, he smells like a
try to
brewery.
pass him off as like a drunk.
Yeah. And how heartbreaking is that? Like, this poor kid that's trying to get money to, like, move out and leave you guys. Ugh. Anyways, it just really hurt. Like, I felt so bad for Adrian, and I felt bad for Rory when we found out what actually happened to him and like what he went through.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I just mention though that after the whole conference thing, when they come back and Adrian finds Rory in his closet and like Rory's crying for Adrian.
Yeah.
My heart. He's just like, I'm so sorry.
Because it's just so sad. Because, like, leading up to that scene, you know how
Well, he knew how
nervous
much, yeah, how much he
Adrian.
wanted this.
Yeah, and how nervous he was, and like how he's like, I'm gonna mess
Yeah.
this up, and like Rory was like, no, you're gonna like do amazing, like your speech is amazing, like you're just gonna do really good, and like obviously he was hyped up, he was excited, and then all of a sudden the stupid video shows, and then you're like, oh shit. It was just heartbreaking. And it just like it felt like such a real scene. Like it honestly felt like I was watching it happen in real time. Like I honestly felt like I was seeing it. Like you know when you like get into a book and like you kind of
Yeah.
you like you don't see words anymore, you just see the scene. That's what I was seeing.
That isn't that the best feeling though when you stop realizing that your eyes are reading lines because
Yeah,
you're just fully imagining it.
but not for this traumatic scene. I was like I'm telling you, man, I was dying. My heart was beating too quickly. I was sweating, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, someone get Adrian out!" Like I knew what was happening when Krew's like, "Oh my gosh, Rory, I gotta call you back," and I'm like, "No!" And anyways, that was me.
I do love, though, I mean, love is kind of a weird word to use in this case, but I appreciate the way that Nikki James was like, all right, this is going to be a bully story. Well, not like bully as in like a bully romance, but like someone who is, you know, going through bullying.
Yeah.
And that she didn't just go for, oh, it will be like physical bullying, you know, like they'll beat him up or something.
No.
Like it's much more subtle than that, but it shows just how hurtful even subtle bullying can be. Because like technically there's no physical harming, but it's like he could have lost his job. He was doing this great talk in front of high school students that, you know, he was really excited for. That got taken away from him real fast.
Yeah.
You know, it's like all these little things. They took his laptop, put a virus on it. Like, it's
His
just,
clothes.
yeah.
Like they put a red panty in it from like obviously one of their like women that they sleep with. And like they just ruined all of his white clothes. And like he obviously like is heartbroken, but he doesn't do anything about it because he keeps saying that if you show a reaction, they're just gonna get worse. And then one day, also his own bed. He didn't even have his own bedroom.
Yeah, people were having sex in his bed, like things like that, where it's your privacy, your belongings mean nothing to these people.
Yeah.
And it just shows how even little actions like that, that seem somewhat insignificant sometimes, they too work towards crumbling someone, like someone's, what's the word I'm looking for?
Self-worth, self-esteem.
Yeah, self-esteem is the word I was looking for. You know, like all of that works towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where he's just like, yeah, I better not just do anything about this because this is just going to make them angrier.
But how did you feel about that? Like, it was like Adrian's willful ignorance to his bullying, and like he kind of like
I don't think he's ignorant to
he's not
it.
ignorant, but I guess he ignored it. Like, not he tried to ignore it. Like, he knew it was happening, but he would just bend his head and continue to live there because he felt like he had no other option. But like he could have went to campus police, went to student housing. He had other options, but I felt like because of like his father hammering in like image matters, like my name matters, and like he had an outlet with Rory. I just like I don't
I
know.
don't think so, though. I think his story is very parallel to Rory's because how did Rory end up where he ended up? Because
Yeah.
he, at that age, was still hoping that someone would like him for who he is, that someone would befriend him and be honest and just be his friend and not his bully for once. So Rory was at the same place and look what happened, but it's kind of like we're just going to keep on believing that that's possible for us because we don't want to believe that, yeah, no one's ever going to like you. And so obviously after the fact, Rory is like, you have to do something. You have to act like that. I think that's where Rory's protectiveness comes through. It's like, I've been there. I see what you're doing, and that's not going to help you out because look what happened to me.
Exactly.
They're just going to work towards bigger and bigger and bigger things until there's nothing left of you.
Exactly. And speaking of the bullies, how did you feel about Marcus? I felt like we had a lot to say, but we didn't say it yet in the chat. So how did you feel about Marcus?
So when you and I talked about him a little bit, I wasn't quite done with the book at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of like, some things I had like forgotten. I have ambiguous feelings towards Marcus because his silence
is compliance.
Makes him just, it makes him just as much of a bully as the other ones.
Yeah.
Because he could have stepped in and he chose not to.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian says at one point he didn't, probably because he's trying to save himself, which is a fair thing to say. And on the other hand, I'm like, when he did have something to do, he did do it in the end. You know, he fully supported what Adrian was saying. He was like, yep, that's all very true, everything that they did. Which, by the way, those fucking guys only got off with a slap on the wrist.
Yeah. Okay, so I see what you're saying, but I have zero empathy for him. Because not only did he just stand by and ignore things that were going on, or he just stood by and actually watched it happen.
Mm-hmm.
He allowed he allowed for it to continue. And he fully knew about the camera for weeks. You know, he knew the camera was in that room for weeks. Not once did he tell Adrian, there might be something in your room. Can you, like, check around a bit? Not once did he, like, actually go in and take out the camera. Not once did he ever stand up for Adrian or, like, even, you know, talk to him. He just basically said, just move out. Why aren't you moving out? You know, like, you can leave. That's all he ever said. Like, Rory's, like, fully says, like, you know, well, first Adrian is like, maybe he isn't as bad as the others. And Rory's like, no, he actually is worse. Like, he's just complying with everything that's going on. And, like, I guess we could argue, we don't know what he was going through. We don't know where he was mentally, blah, blah, blah. But, like, at the end of the day, Adrian was scared to even leave his room to go eat. There were days he would go by not eating. And Marcus was a part of that. Not once did he have an ally in Marcus.
True. But like you said, we also don't know what Marcus's past was. Maybe he was bullied at some point, and that's just the way that he protects himself. Is like, I'm just not going to step in. It's not worth it. It's for my own safety. I'm not I don't really have empathy for him
No, I
either.
know.
I'm just trying to see like both sides because I'm thinking like surely it's more complex than that.
I'm like, no. Marcus is a no.
But like I mean I'm like you. It's like I see one side and I also very much see the other side where it's like
Yeah.
you could have said something that would have been helpful. You could have been a friend to him. You know, that too would have made it a little bit easier to bear probably.
Yeah, or even if he didn't want to confront Adrian and be like, "There's a camera in your room," he literally could have like left him a note, slid it under his door.
He could have been
He
the
could
one
have,
to
like,
go unplug the fucking computer himself instead of calling the boyfriend.
yeah. I mean, that maybe might be asking too much of him because he's gonna actually be confronting people. If he was, a victim of bullying or like a victim of something else that happened to him, we don't know what happened. We don't know anything about Marcus. Um, just like alerting Adrian of what was going on, I think could have been something that he could have done. But anyways, that's my thoughts on him, and I, could care less about him. So Marge, what do you think the monster of the story is?
Well, I feel like we mentioned most of them.
Okay.
But I do think that probably the overarching one for me is really just the stigma around mental health, period.
Mm-hmm.
Because it should not be this difficult for people that need help to find help.
Yeah.
It's mentioned how psychologists are not reimbursed by the government, but psychiatrists are, which is like, I don't know, I could go on a whole tangent on if it's, if your doctor says that you need this, then it should be reimbursed. It's for your health, and so therefore it should be reimbursed. Anyways, but just mental health under like everything that it could mean. So whether it's Adrian or Rory or whoever it is, like I just feel like this stigma is so heavy, and to this day I don't think that we address it enough.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, and that was one of my monsters too. I just feel like no matter what, that mental health stigma, I feel like will always be there, and I hope our generation like breaks down those barriers and breaks down those, I guess, those mentalities that, that reinforce that. And like you could argue obviously that like it's a learned behavior because obviously you learn it from your parents and so on, and like you learn to like kind of scorn people with mental health issues.
Well, I feel like we live in a society of like self-care, which
I love.
in many ways, well, yes, here's the thing though. I feel like self-care oftentimes is like a placeholder thing to do little things that make you happy temporarily, which is okay. However, the overarching problem here is that cannot replace you getting actual help if you need it. And so self-care to me should mean, yeah, sure, do your little mask and your reading session and your whatever it may be. But if you actually need help, self-care means going out and getting that help, whether it's for your body, your mind, whatever it may be. Go and get that help. Don't try to fix it with doing little things that are only ever going to be temporary.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I feel like our society is a lot more vocal about getting help mentally, like getting therapy, speaking to a life coach or a life counselor or whatever. And I just feel like it's more vocal, like it's more public, like it's more publicized, I would say.
Yeah, but it's not more inexpensive. Which means that too often people don't actually, they know that they need help, but they don't get it because they can't.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Okay, so I looked at so I had like that was one monster, but we already covered that. But like I also looked at like the bullying, and like one of the monsters I felt was society, because society also facilitates the behavior of bullies, and like like the constant saying like boys will be boys, or like it's fine, like it's just gonna happen, like you just need to get stronger, like you need to like be able to like have thicker skin to just ignore and like move forward. And it's never like, you know what, you need to stop doing that, or you need to stop being an asshole. Like, if you think about it, Cole, which is Rory's bully that, gave him third-degree burns, only got like 8 months in jail for aggravated assault, despite Rory almost dying. And like you said, Adrian's bullies only got a slap on the wrist and literally goes about life normally. Like, how does that make sense? That was like years and years of torment for Rory. That was years and years of torment for Adrian. He was living with them for 4 years. And like, instead of these monsters actually paying for like the crimes that they've committed and seeing the wrong in their actions, like there's no like rehabilitation, like there's no like learning the betterment, like learning to better yourself. There's nothing there. Like, I just feel like I don't know, do you think it was because like the victims are gay? And like, do you think it's because like they're considered a minority, or like, I don't know. I just feel like bullying like this happens
in part, but not fully. I think society is very good at narrowing down who is different, whether it's that or anything else, really. Like, the second that, I think for Rory, yeah, sure, but also he's a ginger. I don't know why society hates gingers so much.
And also, he also came from a poor neighborhood. So not only was he gay,
he did.
He was obviously, didn't have the means.
A redhead and poor.
Yeah, exactly. And Adrian, obviously, he's white, but he also was like Mr. Rich Boy, and you would think he'd have the perfect life, but actually no, he's been bullied because I guess his roommates picked up he's gay, like calling him by a woman's name, and like, I don't know. I just feel like you said, society just like singles out the minority, singles out the people that are different, and it's just like, it's awful. And I don't know. This book wasn't so far off from reality.
But you know what's really vile, actually? At least for me, what was the most vile about what they did to Rory was the fact that Cole used Rory's sexuality against him. He knew about that, and he used that, and it started off as like a makeout sesh in the sand or whatever, and it turned into that.
I know.
Him being burnt, like, third-degree burns all over his
Rory
body.
thought it was lube, and that he was rubbing all over his skin, but it was just tanning oil. And obviously, since Rory is a ginger, his skin is pale and can get burnt. And it obviously got burnt really badly for him to have third-degree burns. And that's heartbreaking because all he wanted was friends. We're friends.
Well, exactly. Isn't it heartbreaking how during that he was he was recalling how he was telling himself, like, oh my God, is Cole interested in me? Like, are we gonna? And he was fine with it. I mean, he was drunk to begin with.
How did he get that drunk? They kept forcing him
because
drinks.
Everyone kept drinking. Yeah.
And I think it was Cole who kept giving him doubles of everything.
Yeah,
and so he literally got to the point where he was knocked out, and like, it's just hard. And you just hear, like, I'm saying, like, you just hear them laughing in the background, but I mean, like, in my head, like,
we were there.
You hear like the other so-called friends there just laughing, and like while Cole is rubbing him down with tanning oil, and it's just like, that's like not even like, there's so many other warning signs that lead up to this trip to the Dominican, like them constantly daring Rory to do things and laughing about it, and like, it's just like heartbreaking that he was so like wanting of friends that like it got to that point, and society helped to shape those bullies.
Of course, like, just the idea of bullies, like, why do they exist, and how can we even stop those people from existing?
Well, I mean, to be honest, if my kid was Cole, I'd literally throw the whole child out.
But you say that, but would you? You know what I mean? Like, they do have parents.
I mean, first of all, I would never let my child reach to that level. I would hope with my love and my way of parenting and like what I know of the world that I would grow a child up to not be a bully, but a person that fights against bullies. Like, I pray that I am able to do that.
Sure. And I think that's everyone. Unfortunately.
That's not everyone.
There's this...
That is not everyone.
Okay. But there is this thing where it's like the mentality of the group mentality. You know, you don't know how your child, who he's going to end up with. and what kind of mentality is going to be
That is
garnered
true.
by that group. And even the best of kids can end up, calling the little girl in his class names because everyone else is doing it and he just wants to fit in.
Throw the kid out.
That's just the issue.
Throw the kid out.
The whole kid.
Yeah.
Garbage.
There's a dumpster right there.
I think it's easy to say, like, oh yeah, if I did that, it'd be different. Would it? Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't be. It's just sometimes it's circumstances, the people that you end up with, the friends that you end up with, the life that you live, where you live, whatever.
I agree.
Like, it's
to an extent. I just feel like bullying and like hating on someone and like playing on their insecurities is a learned behavior. I'm not saying I'm having a child anytime soon, but if I were to have one, I would hope that my teachings and like what I've brought in our relationship would help deter them from like those crowds and like those behaviors. I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's good to say it now, but you don't know until you're actually in that situation. But I will say a lot of the bullies are...
We'll come back to this conversation in like 10 years.
Yeah, we'll continue this discussion then.
When we're much older and have a bunch of kids.
But I am standing by throwing my whole child out. Throw it out. If your child was Cole, honestly, Marge, you're telling me you wouldn't throw it out?
I mean, of course I want to say that I would, but the truth is, it's your fucking child. You know what I mean?
No, it's not. That child is not mine if they're leaving someone to be burnt to a crisp in the sun.
Seth, there are people on Earth whose child has committed murder, and they probably still love their child.
I mean, I guess because I'm not a mother, I can never, ever speak on that until I am.
Exactly. So it's easy to say, like, oh, yeah, I but the truth is, I think love is a lot more complex than that.
I'm still throwing out the child.
Sorry, future child of Seth. You better be good, or else your mama's just throwing you out. All right. Well, is this it?
Well, on that note, like, I feel like your southern accent just, like, comes out.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was not as depressing as it could have been, so good for us.
No, it wasn't.
And, I mean, I'm now really wanting to reread Krew's book and a couple other books in the series. I cannot recommend it enough, guys. Like, if you read and you like mental health in your books,
and realistic portrayals of mental health, I would say.
Sure. Also angst. She does angst very well, yes, and very often in her books. They're great. It's not, written in a complicated way. It's just easy to read, but complex enough. You know what I mean?
And well-developed characters, I will say.
Yeah.
Her characters are very multifaceted and, like, well-rounded. I really enjoyed her characters.
Yeah. I find that they kind of come alive on the page.
Yes.
Which can't be said for every character. But, like, people like Krew, geez, that man is bigger than the book itself. You know what I mean? Like, the book cannot
contain him.
Contain him.
Now I want to go find Bottoms Up in Dewhurst, Ontario, wherever that may be, and visit him.
Anywho, so that's it. I hope you'll go out there and read the book if you can, or if you're interested.
If not, throw your whole child away if they're a bully. Kidding, not kidding. I'm kidding!
We're throwing you out.
Kidding.
Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for joining us to talk about Shades of Darkness by Nikki James. I hope you enjoyed the episode, at least. If you have anything you would like to add or tell us, or anything really, you can find us online on Twitter. We are the RTM Pod. On Instagram, it is Romancing the Monsters Podcast, as well as on Gmail, which is romancingthemonsterspodcast@gmail.com. I said that really weird. We also have a TikTok, which is Romancing the Monsters Pod. And you know what that we never mention? We have a YouTube account. You can find us on YouTube.
Right.
If you search Romancing the Monsters Podcast, I guess we're probably going to pop up somehow. So if you prefer that format, we're also on there. And you can also find me on both Twitter and Instagram at Foes and Lovers.
And you can find me, Saf, on both Instagram and Twitter at Pros with Woes.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.